The Cannabis for Private Purposes Act is here, but does it mean that the commercial cannabis market game is about to change? That's what we will ask Isabella Mazzone from Hahn Hahn Attorneys, who joins us today here on Legal Talk. Isabella, how's it going? Welcome.
Thank you so much. Everything's good. And how are you, Ian?
All good, thank you. All good. So, Isabella, prior to the national election at the end of May, President Ramaphosa quickly signed quite a few acts of Parliament into enactment, one of which was the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act, or the CPPA. The bill was a hot topic on all our radars and has been highlighted in the SONA speech for the past 3 years as something that was being prioritized. What is the main purpose of this new act?
So, as per the media statement, which was released by the Office of the Presidency on the 28th of May, the purpose is to regulate the cultivation, possession, and use of cannabis by adults in a private setting. Very important. That is literally its restriction. The statement then further reads to say that the consequent regulatory reform that's enabled by the CPA will, amongst others, entirely remove cannabis from the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act. And this will further enable amendments of the schedules to the Medicines and Related Substances Act and provide for targeted regulatory reform of the Plant Breeders' Rights Act, as well as the Plant Improvement Act. And then there are other various pieces of legislation that require amendment to allow for the industrialization of the cannabis sector. The Act then further guides the medically prescribed administration of cannabis to a child, while also protecting children from undue exposure to cannabis. It provides for an alternative manner by which to address the issue of the prohibited use, possession of, or dealing in cannabis by children with due regard to the best interests of the child. It also completely prohibits the dealing in cannabis. Really important.
And does this mean that this act will be opening the market to new regulated cannabis products?
No, and I think this is what has been the most misunderstood part of the act itself. Many people assume that this new act would finally bring cannabis out of its illegal past. However, in fact, it has done quite the opposite when it comes to the actual commercialization of cannabis and cannabis products. If you have a look at Section 2 of the Act, it very, very clearly highlights the restrictions around this Act and where cannabis use becomes legal. And it states that an adult person may use or possess cannabis and without the exchange of consideration per occasion. Very important, without the exchange of consideration, i.e. without any money being paid, provide to or obtain from another adult person cannabis in a private place for a private purpose. So it's now allowing that. However, then it goes on to say, notwithstanding the first part, no adult person may use cannabis in a private place for a private purpose in the presence of a child or non-consenting adult person, or within a reasonable distance from a window of ventilation inlet, doorway, or entrance into another place, or that forms part of any public place where persons congregate within close proximity of one another and where the smoke is likely to cause a disturbance or nuisance. And then it further says that an adult person may possess cannabis in a public place, provided that it may not be used in that public place. So it's quite restrictive in where it is allowed and where it is not allowed. What is also really important is in the definition section of this act that the term deal in, or when you deal in cannabis, has been properly defined as the following: to provide for consideration, receive for consideration, sell, buy, offer for sale, offer to purchase, import, advertise for sale, export, cultivate for the purposes of dealing, and any other conduct to facilitate selling cannabis, but does not include any such activity that is authorized in terms of this act or in terms of a permit or license under any other national legislation. So that will be For example, the permits for the hemp licenses and permits, which are currently being issued. And then also, obviously, the medical grade cannabis, which is completely separate to this. And then when it comes to dealing in cannabis, there are specific offences and penalties which have now been created in Section 4 of this Act. So, yeah, that's a few of the things that's really important to see, that dealing in itself, which is what everyone is doing, is actually completely prohibited in this Act.
And now I can hear some of the listeners asking, but is hemp included in the application of this Act?
Yeah, so this is a really strange one. Cannabis has been defined in the Act as the flowering or fruiting tops of a cannabis plant, and includes products made therefrom, but includes any seeds, seedling, the stalk, leaves, and branches without any fruit or flower, as well as the roots of a cannabis plant, including products made therefrom. So it's a shorter definition than what was in the previous bill, and it differs quite a lot from that definition, as it's much broader in its application. The previous bill, which is basically just the previous version of this Act before it was actually signed by the President, actually had a separate definition for hemp. And cannabis, the definition of a cannabis plant actually specifically excluded hemp. This has all now been removed, which is really strange. So hemp will actually be included until there are other regulations that are published by the ministers, providing for more specific maximum amounts, exclusions, or restrictions as to what cannabis is. And the minister is actually given the power to make these regulations in Section 5 of the Act. So up until we see any regulations talking about hemp, for now, it is included.
Wow, okay. And then which kind of criminal offences have actually been created by this Act? And also, what kind of penalties are we looking at, Isabella?
So Section 4 of the Act creates multiple new criminal offences relating to cannabis. But I think that most importantly, it creates the offence of dealing in cannabis. And the penalty will be a fine or imprisonment not exceeding 10 years or both. Some of the other offences which have been created include knowingly permitting a child to use or possess cannabis. Child definition obviously being anyone under 18. Being in possession of cannabis which is not safely or securely made inaccessible to a child. So somebody who just leaves their cannabis in their house while there's children living in the house. Having in your possession more than the maximum amount of cannabis. So this is also what's interesting about the Act. The previous bill actually already had the maximum amounts defined in the bill. They've now removed all of this, and it will now be published in a separate regulation. So obviously that is quite a point of tension. People were arguing about what the maximum amount should be. So that's why they haven't defined it in the Act. And then cultivating cannabis plants more than the maximum amount, and using cannabis in a public place, obviously, because this is obviously all about private, personal possession and use.
And then finally, Isabella, is the Act in full legal force yet?
No. So even though the Act has actually been signed by the President, the operation date, which is right at the end of the Act, has not yet been proclaimed by the President. So unfortunately, we still have a bit more waiting to do. My assumption being that there is still, quite a bit of public commentary and internal discussions about the maximum amounts, the exclusions, the restrictions. Until they've actually got some clarity on that, I don't see this Act becoming enforced yet. This was, I think I discussed this with Janusz, it was just a way to seem like something is being done before the election, and a bit of a campaigning tactic, in my opinion, because it's not actually saying anything without regulations. It is saying a lot, but I mean, also, if it's not in enactment or in force, rather, then it's not doing anything yet. Exactly. So we still have a lot to look forward to when it comes to cannabis in South Africa.
And then the poll result, the question we asked was, now that the cannabis bill has been enacted, do you think that the sale of cannabis products containing THC is legal? 62% said yes, and 38% said no. So the majority said yes.
Oh, no, it's created a lot of confusion. And I think also, you see these headlines on all the news channels and you think, yes, this is happening. But until you actually look at the document, you don't actually know,
Yeah, exactly. But thank you so much for shedding some light on that matter, Isabella. We really appreciate it.
No problem, and thank you so much for having me again, Leon.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That was Isabella Mazzone, Associate Attorney at Hahn Hahn.
Are you or your business in trouble and struggling to find a solution? Call Hahn Hahn Attorneys as we assist clients in finding solutions. We specialize in consumer and food law, commercial and construction law, forensic investigations and administrative law. Visit hahnlaw.co.za. That's HAHN. We assist clients nationwide. Hahn Hahn Attorneys, because we care. Don't miss Legal Talk with Hahn Hahn Attorneys, Wednesday mornings at 10 on eRadio.